Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Deborah Gerard. I'm your 2020 president. And this is our pre-board meeting update on climate action initiatives. And there was some weird feedback there. So as you know, this is a year when our focus has really been on climate action, and this has been at the heart of everything that we're doing. One of the major things that we did that was voted on earlier this year was to make Bill Leddy, FAIA, the AIA California VP of Climate Action. He is also the co-chair. And his committee throughout this pandemic, while everyone has been struggling with all the other things going on, his committee has been so remarkably focused and active and has been really making amazing progress for us, and we're very proud of that. So today, we're really here to tell you about this and to prepare for our board meeting tomorrow. I want you to go to the next slide. There we go. So this is a little structure of how this 2 hours is going to go. You'll hear from a variety of speakers. You'll hear from the various committee chairs of the COAT committee to give you updates on what they've been up to. We're going to have an important discussion about exploring mandatory continuing education in climate action, and then we'll recap this all. And this is all to prepare for our discussion tomorrow. You guys may recall, and you can go to the next slide, that last year we did something comparable, although in person, so a little more in depth, where we had a session the day before our July board meeting, where we really focused on climate action issues and understanding what the urgency was, and we had a very illustrious board of speakers. And then the following day, the AIA California board unanimously voted to take urgent climate action and endorse the Zero Code in California. And I'm going to let Bill Leddy take over from here, but I just wanted to put the context in. This is very comparable to that, and we will be asking you to take some action tomorrow as well. Bill?
Thank you, Deborah. Welcome, everybody. I wanted to start by just kind of maybe hearkening back to that meeting for those of you who were there almost exactly a year ago, and where Ed Mazzaria, I believe, showed a slide quite similar to this one, and sort of remind you all where we are and why accelerating decarbonization of the built environment is so critical. It's because, we have some stray zeros I see that have been lost in translation. Oh well, 2020 to 2030 is a critical time period. Climate scientists tell us that we have only 10 years to radically reduce greenhouse gas emissions if we hope to avoid catastrophic climate destabilization. So I think we all recognize this is the greatest challenge of our generation. And if we don't succeed in achieving this, other issues that we care deeply about, that AIA California cares deeply about, including resilience, social equity, and other issues, will only get more and more difficult to address. So, as architects, we certainly can't solve all the world's problems, but we can take a leadership role in reducing the emissions of the buildings and the communities that we design. Next, please.
Hey, Bill, can I just jump in for a second? This is really rude. It's Lisa Matheson. The UN, I just want to remind people that the UN just updated that 10 years and said it actually could be in the next 5. They're not.
Well, there you go. Even more critical.
Yeah.
So why is climate action in California important? It's because we're the world's 5th largest economy and the center of global innovation. And for that reason, the nation and the world are watching how we respond to climate action. Ed Mazzaria talks to people all over the world, and he's constantly reminding us that the first thing that energy ministers in India and China And the EU asked him about, climate action in the United States. It's not what's the federal government doing, it's what's California doing. So I think we have to recognize that we have an enormous opportunity and probably, I would say, responsibility to be leaders in climate action here in California, and that by doing so, we can help make a difference globally. Next, please. This is a slide that that reflects the AIA Climate Action Plan that came out earlier this year in April. And I think it's kind of a great, simple haiku. One site, countless challenges, a looming deadline, 7.5 billion clients. This is the ultimate design project. This is why we're here. So with that, I'd like to introduce Marcia Madam, who is the 2019 chair of the National AIA Code Advisory Committee and is also advisory group, and is also currently still on that committee, and she's going to report on what's happening at the national level in terms of climate action. Marcia? You're muted.
Yep, there we go. Is that good?
Yep.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the invitation to come and share just a little bit of what's been happening over the last 3-4 years. And I know many of you on this call are aware of these different activities that have happened at the national level at the AIA, but it is pretty compelling to see how quickly in the way that the National Institute works, the changes have taken place in a relatively short period of time. And I think that the sense of urgency that the National AIA is feeling has really been a result of the work by people here in California and all across the country, really making our voices heard. So I think we in California have a great opportunity, as Bill said, to be leaders. So this all started, or my time on the National Code AG, the advisory group, began just after the election. And as you recall, those were turbulent times in Washington and at AIA. And after a very large outcry from the membership, the National AIA came out with this value statement of where we stand about climate action and stating their belief in science and the importance of the environment and climate. Next, please. That was followed by the next year, again through a membership-led effort through the New England chapter to change the code of ethics. And again, these are the rules by which we as professionals must practice. So the code of ethics was changed to include an obligation to the environment. And part of the 3 parts of the change in this document, I just like to highlight Rule 6.501, which really makes it our professional responsibility, and it's a rule of our profession that we need to advise our clients about the environmental impacts of our projects. So this was a very, very monumental change in the history of the Institute. Next, please. That was followed up very shortly thereafter in February of 2019, and I was actually in the room back in Washington, D.C., when the board of directors at their first meeting decided that they were going to focus all of their activities around environmental stewardship, and they called it the big move. And so that all activities throughout, up and down the Institute, would have this as their focus. Again, a very, very monumental change in the way that the AIA National has been working over the last decades. Next, please. Because of the commitment that was verbally expressed by the board and the national organization, members led a resolution effort at the Las Vegas Convention in 2019. And the resolution identified three things. One, that the AIA must declare an urgent climate imperative for carbon reduction. 2, the profession needed to transform their day-to-day practice to achieve zero carbon equitable, resilient, and healthy environment. And 3, that we must align all the messaging and effort throughout the Institute towards climate action. So, as the slide shows, it was overwhelmingly supported and passed by the membership at the convention. Next, please. Following that, 3 months later, I presented the resolution to the Board of Directors in September. And again, it was unanimously passed and heartily endorsed. And with this resolution, what had been previously called the COAT Top 10 measures were officially adopted as the framework for design excellence that was to be integrated throughout the Institute by every practitioner, again, to really change the way that the profession works. Next. So a little bit about the framework. Again, I hope everybody has a chance to take a look at the website and become familiar with it. This, again, was something that the Committee on the Environment had developed through the top 10 measures and also through the development of the toolkit, sort of the how-to manual of integrating the 10 measures in practice. So with the adoption of this system as the framework for design excellence, which recently went through an editing and revision process, it is now going to be adopted institute-wide, and they are furthering and evolving the toolkit to reflect not only what has been done in the past, but also integrating more about carbon into the toolkit and also social equity to make sure that resilience is better embedded. So this, I urge you all to take a look at this on the AIA website and integrate this into your own practices. Next, please. Another big change at AIA National is that the government relations group became much more focused and targeted in their approach to lobbying Congress, and again, with a lot of pressure from the Committee on the Environment and other resilience working groups at a national level. Over the last 2-3 years, there's been a great amount of effort in meeting with Congress members, actually having 2 members from the AIA give testimony to Congress about the importance of the built environment and in climate action. And many of the things that we have been lobbying for and informing the Congress members about are reflected in the recent framework that came out from congressional leaders about what they plan to do in the future for climate action. So again, a very direct result of AIA's work is now being filtered into policy and what we will see in the future. Very exciting. Next. As Bill mentioned at the beginning, here's that haiku again, which I really love. As a result of all of these efforts and the adoption of the resolution and the adoption of the framework for design excellence, for the first time, the AIA has published and created an AIA Climate Action Plan. And this is very recent. This was just adopted at the April 2020 National Board meeting. I served on this working group, and again, just the sense of urgency is to be commended at the AIA. We had our first meeting at the end of, or the beginning of December. We produced this action plan and document, and it was approved by April with a pandemic in there at the end. So I think, again, everyone's focus and diligence and the momentum of this is really quite compelling. Next, please. So again, in April, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Earth Day and also the 30th anniversary of the Committee on the Environment. And we were in the midst of a global pandemic. So I think that while there are so many issues going on right now, issues that require great attention around environmental issues, but also social justice and health and resilience, that all of these things are not exclusive. They're all connected, and that we need to always be reminded that climate action is at the root of solving all of these issues, and they are all interconnected. So we need to keep our efforts going on all these fronts simultaneously. Next, please. So one of the ways that we can continue to press forward with climate action and integrating the framework for design excellence into our practices, achieving net zero, reaching our environmental goals is through the AIA 2030 commitment. And I hope everybody on the call is a signatory and that you're all reporting. Because if we do not measure what we say we value, if we do not generate the data and really check that what we say we're doing is in fact what we are doing, then our leadership is eroded. So it is, this program is really an essential part of climate action. So I think you're all familiar with the step down process, and that here we are at 2020 with an 80% reduction and needing to get to carbon neutral by 2030. So sign up, track your projects, and report to the AIA. That's the message on 2030. Next, please. Oh, look, part of the slide has disappeared. That's always, oh, there we go. Oh, good. Okay, so 3-year goals for the 2030 commitment is to double the number of signatories. We need to really increase participation. It's very important that we understand industry-wide how we are doing and what challenges people are finding in different regions and in different sizes of firms. That's how we will learn and improve. Next, I think there's one more bullet point. Yes, and another important factor is to make sure that we increase energy modeling, and that we really do raise the number of projects that are doing this type of modeling throughout. Next, please. So California is, of course, really participating in a high level, but we need to do more. We need to get our numbers up. And again, as Bill said, we do have this great responsibility and position to be leaders, not only nationally here in the United States, but people really do look to what the policies and the outcomes and what we are doing here in California. Next. So this is the last pitch for please sign on. You know, let your networks grow and be leaders in your own communities to have other people, other firms find out about the 2030 commitment and sign on and help us move this program forward. Next, please. So one of the things that we're going to be, the AIA 2030 commitment group is working on this year is to shift more towards carbon and to, again, emphasize fossil fuel free designs. They're also looking at embodied carbon in the tool. And stay tuned for a revamped DDX, the tool which will, the data collection tool, that hopefully will be user-friendly and will allow us to track this data in a better way. And again, to share the results of the work that we're all doing and the progress that we're making towards getting to net zero. Next, please. I think that's it for me. Yes. So thank you very much. I think it's a very exciting time to be an architect. There's a lot going on, and California has a really important role to play. And we, as practicing architects in California, really need to bump up our educational activities and training so that we can meet these goals and also meet our state code requirements. And again, really take a leadership role. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. And as you can all see, there's a lot going on, and we're right in the middle of I think a major sea change in how we practice architecture and how we make buildings in the 21st century. So, next slide. I'm gonna run through fairly quickly to leave time for the steering committee, the code steering committee chairs to report on their various activities, which is a lot going on. I'm just going to run quickly through our 2020 agenda, which gives you a sense of the kind of the range of things that we're working on simultaneously. So advocacy is the first item. Scott Shelf, FAIA, will be talking about that in more detail. We're taking a three-pronged approach on this to advocate for for decarbonization at the municipal level, advocating for rapid electrification, renewable energy, and adaptive reuse and mass timber. Lots of progress to report there. At the state level, thanks to Mike Malinowski, we are progressing with advocating for the zero code as a REACH code within Cal Green in the 2022-23 cycle. That's moving along quite nicely, and we just had great news today, just this morning, from Architecture 2030, that they are in the process with working with the Code Steering Committee. They're in the process of revamping the zero code for California to simplify it and to bring it more in line with the local electrification movement that's happening across California. So that's excellent news, and things are starting to really come together. And then, of course, we're going to be advocating for the zero code as we move forward into Title 24 as quickly as possible. Next, please. Chapter input. Sharon Rephem is and Heidi Kreitner leading that effort, and trying to make sure that we're working very closely with the network of state chapters and the local code chapters around the state. And she's got a lot to report on statewide roundtables and on some really very interesting information that we've collected through surveys from them. Next, please. Key to all this, of course, is communications, and Henry Siegel and Avide are pushing that forward, and they'll report on our outreach to the membership and beyond, and also plans for outreaching to the public to talk about why this is important, why climate action is really critical for all of us to be taking. Next, please. And finally, education. Frank Bostrom and Bill Burke are going to report on how we can advance net zero carbon literacy within the profession. A whole variety of efforts going on there, but I think the thing that we're going to be focusing on as at the end of this little session, as Deborah mentioned, is the key component of how to educate the profession at large in California on this rapidly changing regulatory landscape, and why it's important for all of us to be leaders in our communities toward decarbonization, and what role continuing education can play in that as a stimulus to generate this tipping point that we all are trying to move toward. So with that, I think there's one more slide here. Yes, so here are the esteemed subcommittee chairs of the AIA California Code Steering Committee, and with that, I'd like to leave more time for them to tell you about all the activities they've been up to. So Scott and Simone, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Bill. I'd just like to start with a shout out to my co-host, Simone Barth. Simone's immediate task has been organizing a roundtable with the AIA Los Angeles and AIA California on electrification of affordable housing. That's coming up on August 6th at 4 o'clock, and we encourage you to attend. Next slide. Bill's task to our committee is shown here. And this is kind of what we're taking on. The first is zero code for California. And with Michael Malinowski's leadership, we're trying to get that adopted into Cal Green and eventually into Title 24. The local electrification ordinances and REACH codes is a big focus, and that'll be what I'll be following up on for the remainder of this presentation. Focusing on existing buildings and taking advantages of all the embodied energy that's already in those is a big focus, and Larry Strain is working on that. That includes trying to get the adoption of the International Existing Building Code. And finally, mass timber. And we the success fell into our lap from last year's committee. This was recently approved up to 18 stories effective July 2021. So we're expecting to see much bigger and many more mass timber buildings going forward. Next slide. So I want to explain a little bit about these, about our approach to the zero code. So many of you have worked on zero energy buildings, and I think the formula is pretty clear. You need to design a really efficient building. At a minimum, it has to comply with Title 24. And then second, you need to make it all electric so you can easily supply that energy with 100% clean renewable energy. Now, traditionally, we thought about this at the building level, but it just wasn't scaling up fast enough. And we think it should apply to all new buildings. Well, how do we do that? Well, the Title 24 is required, of course. The all electric, we're working on passing these local REACH codes, which I'll show you. And then you supply that with 100% clean energy. So next slide. Fortunately, we have a strong series of strategic partners, the NRDC, the Sierra Club, the Rocky Mountain Institute, and the Building Decarb Coalition are all working on building electrification. They have a robust public policy effort that we're able to plug into. They're able to help us with those policy issues. On the other hand, they really need us as the building industry professionals who are expert on this. We can answer technical questions, we can help solve code and policy issues. So it's been a very productive coalition. Next slide. So I wanted to just illustrate how the power of electrification. So it varies depending on where you are, but California's electric grid as a whole has been getting much cleaner and much lower carbon faster than almost anybody expected. This is Sonoma Clean Power, and they have a number of areas that they supply in the Sonoma area. And if you look at the two red bars on the left, the far left one is a standard home, code compliant, Title 24, new home, and it emits about 3 tons of carbon equivalent every year. If you do a high energy efficiency home that's mixed fuel, again with gas, the red bars, you save about 10 or 15%. If you switch to an all-electric building and you do that same code standard home, you'll see you're way down at about 0.6 tons of carbon. So about an 80% reduction just from switching fuels to all electric and no longer burning those fossil fuels. You can then supply that fuel, that electricity with 100% clean energy and get to zero carbon. So the power of that fuel switching and going to 100% electric is really dramatic. Next slide. So this is the spreadsheet on the right shows the cities and counties that have to date adopted and approved electric REACH codes. There's a variety of different ones. Some of them are all inclusive and apply to all building types and all appliances and so forth, such as Berkeley. A few of them are more limited. If you look at Carlsbad, for example, they were the first one to pass an electric REACH code. And they made it apply just to residential water heaters. They're now looking to expand that. You'll see there's a lot of X's. If you look way over to the right-hand side under the life sciences, some of the cities have excluded life sciences buildings. So you'll see there's quite a range. Some cities have made exceptions for things like gas stoves or fireplaces, but by and large, they're pretty comprehensive. A few things that have just happened in the last week. PG&E wrote the California Energy Commission in terms of 2022 Title 24 saying they support phasing out gas. Pacific Gas and Electric supports electrification. They don't want to keep investing in gas infrastructure that has a 50-year payback period when we have to be at carbon neutrality way before then. Somebody's going to have to pay to take it all out. The AIA California Council just wrote a letter to the Energy Commission yesterday, Deborah Gerard, also supporting electrification in the Title 24 2022 code. San Francisco's in progress, and we're especially focused now on bringing more cities in Southern California into this fold. So if you have projects in Southern California, if you live or work in Southern California, we'd love for you to join us. Next, please. I think sometimes people don't realize what's going on with our grid. The utilities, of course, have the renewable portfolio standard. We're currently at about 35% renewable energy. On top of that, there's a bunch of clean energy. There's the hydro and the large hydro and the nuclear that don't count toward renewables. But there's also these community choice energy providers, or CCAs. They now are in these green spots, and many of them were formed explicitly to green the power system even faster. Next slide. And you'll see here, on the left are the utilities, and on the right are the CCAs. All of them offer 100% renewable power. But if you look at the base options for the CCAs, some of them are very clean. If you just look at the percent clean energy, that's zero carbon energy, so that includes large hydro. But starting at the top, we're at 81%, 88%, 100%, 100%, 62%, 100%. So if you have an all-electric building in any of those territories, and these are big territories, you're at a zero emissions building almost. It's really an astonishing way to scale up the zero carbon buildings. Next slide. So I just wanted to leave with a few resources if you want to poke around on these later. I want to call specific attention to that first one. We've got a slide deck of all electric projects. Whenever we go to propose an electric reach code, somebody says, oh, you can't do that here, or you can't do this building type, or you can't do this thing. So we collect examples from all of you and other architects and other colleagues, and we put them into a slide deck, and we organize them by building type and by location so that we have examples to show. So take a look at this link. We'd love to add your projects, especially if you have projects outside the Bay Area. We've got a lot of Bay Area projects. So please let us know if you have any all-electric projects, and we will put them in there and give you credit for it. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Scott. I think, Sharon, are you next up?
I believe this is Michael Malinowski.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, just a quick overview of some of these other related initiatives working with Scott and his team. This is more from the perspective that Mark Christian and I are working on this regulatory and legal environmental issues. So we do have a direct link we've created between AIA California and the California Energy Commission. We had an early in-person meeting with high-level staff, and of course we can't do that anymore, but we're still working on a number of areas of common interest, like getting metrics into architects' hands that are consistent with the national databases and reporting. This work on the zero code, as Scott mentioned, we're making incredible progress, and in fact the zero code that will be going into CalGOD is a new zero code. It's sort of zero code version 2, a little different than the zero code that the board saw last year in the fall. This zero code will include consideration of electrification, greatly simplified, and I'm hoping that it also has a mechanism in it to deal with those special cases. I see in the chat some comments that there are some technical issues in certain narrow cases in regard to electrification, and we need to not be ignoring that potential. The AICCA is officially supported electrification. As Scott mentioned, we're on the CEC's official docket. And in fact, the new offices spearheaded through Nikki and her team is among the very first in Sacramento, actually, to be all electric and green power. We do have 2 code changes in the process. Those hearings are going to start in the next couple of months. We're about to launch a major advocacy outreach effort to bring in stakeholders and also to identify where pushback is going to come from. One of those is the zero code into CalGreen. The other is an expanded version of the international existing building code. In California, we have adopted only one of the 3 compliance paths, and we'd like to see all the compliance paths. There are 3. 2 of which we don't have access to in California, because when we save an existing building, there are huge embodied carbon benefits. And finally, we're building connections with a whole variety of stakeholders that range from State Fire Marshal, we've had meetings with them, HCD, the Building Standards Commission, organizations like CALBO and ICC, ongoing meetings, and also partners in the green movement, Decarbonization Coalition, National Resource Defense Council, Sierra Club, and others. So, and with that, I'll pass it back to Bill.
Thanks, Mike. Good job. Sharon, do you want to talk about chapter input?
Sure. So I didn't know what other illustration to use for this, but we did a survey of chapter COAT leadership across the state in April, and we took note of a number of things, what they need, potentially what they could offer to some of the goals that we're putting forth at the state level. And we got a lot of feedback. And next slide. Some of that feedback, when you have a chance to look at your board packet, might be of interest beyond even just what COAT is doing, about some of the challenges that the local COAT committees and people have. But in any case, next slide. We learned a lot about what they needed, and we had that fed into an initial roundtable that we did for the COAT leadership and chapter leadership across the state. That was in May. And it's, we used the slide deck from that as part of the slide deck that you're seeing today. So they got the full information on what National is doing from Marcia and her team. We've talked about what the state initiatives are and looked at some of the local things that could be done. And then we had a very frank discussion, next slide, on some of the things that could happen that the state level COAT could do to help support local COAT initiatives. And we were also looking at it as a two-way street, as the local COAT folks need support. No reason that all 22 of them have to create their own content. At the same time, they represent local leaders, and they can support some of the things that Scott was talking about in terms of local municipalities taking on some of these goals that we've shown. And one of the things we heard loud and clear was that they would like to have more of these things. At first they said monthly, we said no, but quarterly. So we've scheduled quarterly meetings with the statewide group through May of 2021, and you can see the kinds of things that we'll be focusing on at each of those meetings. Mark and Mike will be leading the first one in August, on August 12th, and then our communications group will be giving them information on making the business case. That was a loud and clear information that they needed at the local level to convince not only authorities having jurisdiction, but also membership in some of the more conservative areas about why this is an important topic. Scott and Simone will be helping with the local engagement piece, and then we're going to be reaching back out to local COAT folks to hear about their success stories so we can share that across state groups. So we're looking at this kind of as a outward focus and this as an inward focus of how we can make COAT stronger at the state level. Next. And that was it.
Thank you, Sharon. Henry, you're up at Avide.
Thanks, Bill. Next slide, please. So we are working in 3 separate areas, and the one we've gotten the biggest jump on is member communications. And the first thing we've started working on are a number of short pieces on what can I do right now as a practitioner to engage in some of these issues and work them into our practice as quickly as possible. And some of you may have seen the piece that already came out about embodied carbon. So we're going to try to structure each of these pieces about what's the issue, why is it important, what are the cost and code implications, and then a number of recommendations of what can I do right now, and then resources and links to follow up on that. So that's one we've gotten started on. We have pieces on energy use intensity and electrification coming soon in Architecture 2030, why that's important. And then we'll have more throughout the rest of the year. We've been working on with Shannon Calder on the webpage, and she was able to move very quickly, and we really appreciate that. So that climate action is now in the main red banner right at the top of the webpage. So we have a place that people can go immediately and find things like these "What Can I Do Right Now" articles and everything related to climate action. We're also just getting going on social media. So Avide is heading that up. I don't know, are you on the call, Avide? I don't believe she is. And she's putting together social media packages so that everybody, starting with our COAT committee of about 50 people, so that they can take the links to this recent article on embodied carbon and communicate that throughout all their social networks, as well as through the AIA social media. And really try to spread the word and make sure people are able to see all this information. And then, of course, as design awards happen throughout the year, the Leading Edge Award are the design awards chosen from the ones that get the highest technical scores. I'll talk about that in a moment, for sustainable design. And we really want to promote those and tell their stories and tell why they're important. And then we're working with Sharon to communicate to COAT chapters as well. Next, please. The business case for decarbonization is really important. I think that one's going to take us a little more work to develop, because we want to make sure it's thorough and covers everything from cost and why it's important from an environmental point of view, and make sure that it's a really thorough piece so that it can be used by practitioners to talk to their clients and to talk to agencies. We want to work with Scott and his group on developing tools for advocacy that communities can use. And again, promote our leading edge award-winning projects. Next. So the final area that we're working in that's been very active lately is in design awards. This year, we've implemented the Common App. The Common App was developed by the National COAT Committee as an application that to all design awards, meant to be for all design awards programs, from national to regional to local. And we're one of the beta testers of that at the state level. And it incorporates the definition of design excellence that Marcia did such a good job of presenting, that's based on the AIA COAT top 10 metrics. We used that for the first time this year. It was pretty painless. We've gotten some questions during the process, and we're going to compile those and work to update the Common App and make it a little bit easier to use. I have been the representative for the last few years for help being the co-representative to the group that helps choose jury members for design awards programs. And I'm turning that over to Jennifer Devlin of EHDD to make sure that there are people in the jury mix every year who understand the metrics and understand sustainability, so that every project gets reviewed for that. And in addition to that, there is a group of about 15 to 20 people who review every design award submittal. There are 3 people who look at every submittal and score it on a 1 to 5 scale for how it's doing based on the Common App on the technical metrics, and then scoring it. And then the Leading Edge Award group comes out of that scoring system. So only projects that score 4 or above are eligible for the Leading Edge Award projects. And we really want to do everything we can to get the word out to the public about those. And then we're looking at other ways to help instruct the jury, for example, give them instructions about how to use the technical review scores, and then set up chapters to help them implement these kinds of systems for their local design awards programs. Next. So hopefully you all saw the embodied carbon piece, what you can do right now. If you did not get that in your email box, please let me know so we can make sure you get that. And we've really already made fairly quick progress with the website and the social media presence, and we're going to keep rolling that out as the rest of the year continues. Next. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Frank?
All right, we ready? Go ahead, roll them.
You're up.
I'm up. Okay. Last year, the Education Committee came to the realization that there's a certain urgency in the area of education because the market, the changes that you can see on the screen here, they're just all advancing very, very rapidly. The need for continuing education became very, very apparent. It was a recommendation that we sent up to the full committee, COAT committee last year, asking them to take a look at this issue because you can see it's pretty huge at the moment. So, and that was pre-COVID-19. So that's where we went. So next slide. So moving forward, we had an interesting thing this year. We had like 23, 24 people apply for the Education Committee. This was about 2.5 to 3 times the size of the normal committee. So the issue to move forward, create new education programs, and also integrate the AIA framework for design into the process. As Marcia mentioned, this was a vision that Nikki had also. So we're working with that, moving forward, that all education kind of fits within the framework for design excellence. Next slide. You can see one of the things, and I hope you've all been participating in the webinars that have been going on. These are the ones that have taken place so far: energy code updates, water integration, energy code updates, again, non-res. Ecology today was very good. These are the ones that are coming up July through December, ADUs. So I hope everybody's participating on these. The numbers have been really good. Next slide. Out the door, we're doing very, very well on this for first year programs, and I can't say enough to staff on this. Kudos to them. It's a very good job. If you look at a national program, you're going to have about 1,300 with a national audience. These numbers that we got here are better than a lot of the local utilities and what they're drawing with their programming. So I think the membership should be very, very proud of the quality of the programming that's been done and the numbers, because the numbers indicate the response is very well, which means that the quality of the education there is excellent. Next slide. Given that we had 23 people, we had to break it up into manageable chunks here. So we broke into 4 areas, 4 commitments. Our subcommittees, the first one was kind of learning from each other to look at new content for next year, to look at a theme for next year, to help with the communications committee. And one of the things we're trying to do is include more practice in the content that we deliver going forward. And they're doing very, very well. They're finally hitting stride here. Next slide. The next one was Architecture 2030. The goal here was to kind of demystify a lot of the 2030 aspects of why people aren't participating and to try to make the case so that more firms do participate. So, and it's off to a very robust start on this, and we're very, very pleased. Next. The third one, we wanted to look at the firm roundtables a little bit and develop some conversation here about continuing education, the value of continuing education, the kinds of continuing education that firm owners would like to see, and see what kind of things they would like to be helped with in the area of continuing education. Edward Dean, as you know, is not just a PhD, but he was around for the initial Title 24 activities, and we're very, very pleased to have him as a chair. Next slide. And the last one is next steps. What's on the horizon? You know, what's coming in the next 5 years? No one saw COVID-19, but what are the trends and what kind of things do we need in the next few years? So Stephen Castellanos, as you know, is a past president of the council. He's a past state architect and secretary of the Institute. And there was nobody better to have as a chair for this committee, and it's going to be interesting to see what they come back with, but we have to keep an eye on the future and what those trends are. Next slide. Initial outcomes. We've been working with Pro Practice this year. Don Caskey and Stephen Hall. It's working out very, very well. I really like the energy that's there, and I think this is very, very good. As I said earlier, integrating the AIA framework for design excellence throughout the whole building is a goal, and it's taking shape, and we're very happy the way it's going. We're collecting a lot of climate action resources, and working with Bill Burke, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, you ask a question, stand back from your screen, because believe me, when it comes back, it's very robust. We're also promoting the 2030 commitment, and we're very, very, very pleased that the mandatory continuing education requirement has reached the level that it has today. We owe a lot of appreciation to Bill Leddy for the work that he's doing on this and spearheading it. And we certainly hope that everybody's on board. It's going to be a journey, but we need to be at the table on the 28th of, or not, well, in September of this year when CAB meets. It's really, really important. So I really hope that the board sees the urgency and agrees. So Bill, it's all yours.
Thanks. Next, please. So Frank, jump in as we go here. I'm just going to briefly give you the background for this this idea of the mandatory continuing education for zero net carbon design. Next, please. So we did a little research into, what the mandatory continuing ed requirements are across the nation, and I didn't know this, and I was kind of shocked to find out that out of 53 states and territories, California ranks 48th in the number of continuing education learning units that are required for licensure. I think there's an interesting thing. We talk about California being leaders, and we're not necessarily leading in this department. 79% of the states in the country require 12 mandatory continuing ed hours per year. We require 2.5. So I think we can debate about whether this is a big problem or not. But I think the next slide. I think the big point is that we feel that if we're going to spend time, working on our every time we sign up for our license and renew our license, if we're going to be spending time doing continuing ed, it certainly is important to do continuing ed around ADA and universal design. We don't debate that, but we do think we need to ramp up zero net carbon literacy as quickly as possible among all the architects in the state. So the goals here, as I say, educate all the architects in the state on this issue, prepare all architects for a rapidly changing code landscape. So this is going to be happening as we heard from Scott and others about the rapid electrification and REACH code initiations around the state at the municipal level. We need to respond by preparing our profession for those changes. But we're also seeing a shift in the marketplace, and this just makes good business sense. We have to be prepared to lead in the business aspect of this, becoming experts in resilient design and in low carbon design, because if we don't, there are others who will do it for us. And then, of course, we want to help mobilize the profession to help lead this across the state. And I think we're going to initially focus, because we think it's so critical, on this idea of reducing operational carbon or going to zero net carbon design. And eventually we'll expand to resilience and to embodied carbon as those issues become more definitive. And along those lines, we are in the process of working on a collaboration with the California Architects Board. President Tian Feng, we've had some nice conversations with him about their vision about continuing ed in California. They are already planning to create a broader spectrum or a broader series of tracks to require architects for licensure to take continuing ed learning units in. That includes, of course, a continued ADA universal design requirement, and we're talking about adding zero net carbon and also resilience as two separate tracks that would be required. So we're looking forward to a collaboration with them. And I think the last point is that there's been a lot of concern both at CAB and at the AIA California and our members about the quality of the instruction, and that's something that we are united about improving. Next, please. So the details. So I mentioned this 3-4 tracks, including universal design, ZNC, resilience. The final numbers of the overall learning units will be determined. The process is that we want to work together with CAB, and then it has to go to the state legislature for approval. And so we need to get a unified voice with them, and then to enlist champions of the legislature to pass this. The final number of learning units will then be determined. But I think to begin with, what we're asking the board to vote on tomorrow is the idea of 5 zero net carbon learning units every 2 years to be added to the existing 5 of the ADA. And there's a lot of benefits to this. These are units that are good for AIA credit, and will be provided through courses that AIA California hopes to provide for free to all California architects to help lift the general knowledge level up for everyone, not just members. So, and again, as I say, we're committed to working with with CAB to ensure the quality of course providers moving forward. Next, please. So the benefits, the sort of whole triple dipping idea here, that the learning units could be used for California licensure for AIA, HSSW learning units, as well as LEAD continuing ed learning units. As I mentioned, the financial burden of this will be lessened by the fact that we will be providing content from AIA California for free. There's lots of existing expertise in the state of California that we can draw upon, and we think this can be done very easily. And I think the whole idea here is to prepare the profession to create foundational expertise so that we are perceived as leaders in our communities toward this regenerative and abundant future we hope to create. Next, please. So the bunch of frequently asked questions about all this. I know, many folks have said, why should we do this now? I hope some of these have been answered during this presentation. Why do this now if the code doesn't require it yet? Well, it's going to require it soon, and we probably should get in line to anticipate that. Is this an unnecessary burden on small firms? I would argue that it's in the interest of every architect to understand how to do this and to be a viable business moving forward in this changing world. This is all about adaptation and preparing for the future business climate. We've tried to address the issue of the expense and the time consumption to the members by proposing that we provide these classes for free. Is this an extra hurdle to becoming an architect, or will it discourage young professionals, young people from joining the profession? I think I saw a couple of chat points earlier on about the fact that the younger generation is all over this stuff. I mean, these folks, it's their problem that they're going, sadly, that they're going to be inheriting more so than my generation. And we do need to get them included in the conversation. but we also feel that this would actually be an added benefit for the AIA California and for AIA National by becoming actually more relevant to younger professionals. And that of course addressed the last question. What's more relevant than protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the California public? So next, please. So this is the motion that we are going to be presenting to the board tomorrow. And we presented this to XCOM a few days ago, and they voted unanimously in support of this, to endorse this this motion. So I'll just read it out here, just so you don't all have to read it yourself. AIA California will work with the California Architects Board to promote and obtain a requirement for architects to complete an additional 5 hours of continuing education in building decarbonization, zero net carbon design every 2 years as a condition of license renewal beginning with the 2023 renewal cycle. So that's our presentation, and I'd like to hand it back to Deborah, who will lead what I hope will be quite a lively discussion on this topic. Frank, do you want to add anything?
Nope, all good, Bill. Excellent job.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Bill, and your committee for all of the work that you're doing on our behalf, and for really taking this and pushing it forward very quickly, and the great leadership that you're showing here. So to the rest of us all, so if we believe in this mission, and we know that we need to work very fast to make the difference that we need. And it's one of the reasons that pushing for the code change was really important. Now we also have to make sure that all architects are properly educated and prepared so that we don't fall short on that. And so these mandatory continuing education requirements, we think, will really be beneficial to help keep us at the top of our game and able to understand the codes that we're pushing forward, and to really provide the right response for our projects and our clients. It lets the code officials know that we're serious, so hopefully it will help them have greater confidence that if they enact or when they enact these codes, and we're, as has already been talked about, this train is moving forward, but that the profession is going to be capable of supporting it. And so that's just a little bit of comfort that we think comes along with this. But now it's our turn to make sure that we can live up to that. We also can't only talk to people who support this. We have to talk to the entire profession. Otherwise, it's a very insular discussion. So we need this to be profession-wide, industry-wide. And, unfortunately, the AIA doesn't cover the entire profession. So that's one of the reasons to have this be a condition of licensure as opposed to just an AIA requirement. It does require legislative action, as Bill already mentioned. And so all these other things are steps to kind of get the right coalition together so that the requests of the legislature are supported, but it's also the right request. And Mark, Christian, I don't know if you want to pipe in and make any quick comment about that as a process, or I know you're not on the screen, but I think you're listening in. Mark? No Mark. All right, well, we'll let him join us when he can. But so now it's time for the rest of you to ask this illustrious panel any questions that you have as a result of what's on the table in front of you. So, any questions? Raise your hand if you do through the participant button, and we will recognize you. No hands. Ah, there we go. Winston, please ask away.
As I took the proposed measure back to our local board, overwhelmingly, the feedback I got was positive and support, but there was a sense of not wanting to get too ahead of our members and some of the concerns they may have. So just to voice some of that, there was some discussion specifically on the specific proposal of 5 hours, and I guess I would ask, how did you arrive on that? And does that necessarily need to be so specifically part of the resolution considered?
Bill, would you like to address the 5 hours, or would you like me to get started?
I can take a crack at it. So I think the we know we're mindful that this issue came up maybe with less preparation or less warning about a year ago at the board meeting, and there's sensitivity about the number of hours, and I think what we I think decided to do was to start with a number that we felt was sort of a reasonable minimum of education, just basically matching the ADA requirements. This is partly because of the conversations with CAB and their interest in creating this sort of 3-track, continuing ed model moving forward: ADA universal design, zero net carbon design, and resilient design, all of which again are all about the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and so we started with that. I think our goal is to get to the board to approve the concept of doing this. I think the actual number of learning units is going to be a source of debate and discussion with the legislature and with others. And I think the first thing we want to do is come to some sort of agreement with CAB about how this is all going to play out. But I think if we're being true to the urgency that we feel, we need to make at least some starting point of getting folks to do this. So that was my response.
Thank you.
A good one it is. Thank you. And everyone can certainly take more than that, but this would be what the mandatory would be. Next question. Anyone?
Yeah, this is Stephen Hall. I'm 100% on board with this as part of the ex-con and as part of the vote that occurred earlier this week. But I wanted to make sure that other people knew that I was also kind of the devil's advocate in some ways in terms of, a multiple state licensee. And one of the things that came in and as part of this thing is that the credits have to, be part of the AIA system. So it's not something that is an addition to, which a lot of times, because of California being unique in terms of accessibility codes, is a problem with other states. So, as a way to start, that was one of the things that I kind of advocated a little bit for, and I think it's in there now, and that makes it so much easier to try to convince other people that this is something that just needs to be set aside in your normal community AIA learning units that are required.
I think that's a great comment to make. And I just want to reiterate, this is really about our leadership. And, right now, this ask of the board is for us to show leadership in not only in the profession, but in the broader communities that we serve. Carrie Bernstein.
Hi, this is just so great and so necessary. In all of our projects, collaboration with the contractor and the role of the contractor in achieving sustainable design can't be understated or overstated. So I'm wondering if rather than, as we move forward, really integrating members from the construction industry with the architects in these learning efforts and collaboration efforts to make sure that we're, we also have team members who are equally prepared to do the documentation, selection, and specification of certain materials, because we don't certainly specify every single thing. We can set standards, but there are other things where, the contractor is also going to make some decisions. So reaching out through Calbo perhaps to, to our collaborative partners, as well as consultants.
Sure, just to stay focused on this, this is really about our continuing education as a requirement for licensure. So that puts this particular topic in a perhaps a very focused attempt. But certainly to do a great sustainable project, you need great partners who are equally educated. So I think all of us support that as well. Anyone, Bill, on your side want to talk further about the broader point of educating others?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a good point, Carrie. And I do think a lot of what we're seeing and what we're trying to help encourage, of course, is this rush to a tipping point where, the marketplace, which has already adapted fairly well to, sustainability issues, will continue to adapt to this need for decarbonization. I think it's really interesting to note that, for example, the two, even now, the two most, the fastest growing job descriptions in the country are solar energy technician and wind power technicians. So the shift in the economy to this is happening quickly, and I think what will happen is there will be the more that we can collaborate, the better. But at some point, hopefully this will gain momentum, even more momentum, and people will realize, and in all the industries we work with, will realize the critical need to engage with these issues.
Drew has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Bill and the COAT folks. This is long needed, and I think what's great about this that I think the board needs to think about tomorrow is we need to be leading this conversation as opposed to being dragged by the hand, either by CAB or by the legislature or something like that, and where we end up with something that is potentially onerous for us or potentially not going to do the education that I think we really all need to have on this subject moving forward. And I think we can really take this as an opportunity to educate both our membership, but also non-AIA licensed architects in the state of California to the what we should be leading the conversation about. And so I really appreciate all the work that they've done, and I think we should vote absolutely yes to this tomorrow.
And I want to just recognize, Drew, that I believe you were the one who brought this up from the floor last year. And so, well, that was...
Yes, I am. Yes, we were talking about it. I called for a vote on it and it failed, but that's okay.
And while that was a lively discussion a year ago, look where we are a year later. So, thank you for your willingness to stand up and put this in the forefront. And, it certainly contributes to where we're headed right now today. Lisa Matheson wanted to make a comment rather than a question, I think, was the distinction. Lisa, go ahead. Lisa. Okay, I'm gonna guess Lisa has muted herself. Oh,
yeah, she's still muted. Don Caskey also has a comment.
Okay,
Or
Don.
Well, I just wanted to reemphasize something that Stephen did in regards to a couple of things. First of all, as far as this kind of continuing education being onerous, we are way behind all the other states in the country, pretty much. And in many respects, I always thought that we've kind of done the route with ADA, but we're not going to beat that one politically. That's not a place where we want to shorten those hours to the benefit of where we're going with this. And I don't see it as long as these hours that we're going to spend over 2 years, which is 5 hours a year, are balanced in a way that they can be used both, you know, for ADA and for different state licensures and all the rest of that. I just don't see this being a problem. In fact, if it was my way, I would actually add some, because I guess that's my wheelhouse. But I would add some for resiliency and some other things too. But you know, it's one step at a time, and you don't want to make it onerous. But I don't think this is a big thing for us big hurdle for all of us at all.
Hey, Deborah, I found my mute button.
Okay, and Lisa, and then Ian, and then Jennifer.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my video button is now telling me it doesn't work, so I'm in a pink hat permanently. I just wanted to comment that I think that this education component this is great timing. And speaking from my position on the Strategic Council, I think everything the state is doing right now in the direction we're going is so wonderfully in step with what National is trying to do. And I just want to comment again on kind of how I feel about this whole topic of sustainability resilience, which is that I think this is the opportunity for us as architects to really take a leadership position. And I think the situation we're in as a world right now is really calling for us to do that. So I think this is a really good step towards that. And again, I think it fits really well with what National is doing. And I'd love to think California can lead the country.
I think we all support that, and the pink hat looks great. Ian.
Yeah, I guess I have a comment as well. Just back to Don's mentioning that this is hopefully not going to be a battle as far as state regulation goes, but I think it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle just because of what we experienced with the emerging professionals and trying to modify the use of the term architect, which was vetoed by the past governor. So maybe Newsom isn't so adverse to any changes at all and will consider it once it gets to his desk. But I think we should anticipate some semblance of a counterpoint to adding to the continuing education and consider whatever we do with this board as the first step into the stronger efforts that we're going to have to do to get this done.
I think that's a great point, and we are needing to address this from multiple fronts. And as you pointed out, getting through the legislature is one thing, then it has to be signed into law by the governor. And so now that we know how things have gone in the past, we have a better sense, I think, of how we need to approach things. And as you know, we've got a very great group of advocates working for us, starting with Mark Christian, as well as other folks that he's allied with. So I think that's good points and a part of the effort we're going to have to take. But the first step is the one that we're hoping to take tomorrow and get this body in support of moving forward on this, because I think that's really where the momentum needs to come from. Jennifer, I don't know if you want me to just read out your question or if you want to ask it yourself. But Jennifer has said that her biggest concern is the burden on small firms and primary caregivers. The time it takes to perform all the required CEUs for many in these positions can be difficult to perform. I know of those who have dropped out of the AIA during this time, I guess, due to the difficulty of getting the time to get the CEUs in. In particular, when we're talking about equity and equality, it can be possible that the unintended consequence of adding additional hours could lose members from the profession. And I think that's a fair point. It's one of the things that Bill tried to address in his questions that he answered, because we knew that was a question that would absolutely be on people's minds. And it is one of the reasons that AIA California is being committed to supporting the CEUs from a financial standpoint so that there's not a cost. Yes, it's true, you need to have the time to do it, but we are talking about 2.5 hours a year. And in general, we've been doing our sessions during lunch so that people can leverage their time well, and they're all recorded. So if you can't take it during lunch, you can listen to it at any time after that and register yourself for the credits. So I think there are a lot of workarounds to address these concerns for small firms, for people starting out in the profession. And so I think that we can work with that. And one other thing I guess I'll add to that is that if we don't show leadership, our profession is going to take a bigger hit. And so this is a moment for us to really prove to everybody that we are leaders in the design and construction industry, and that will help do a whole lot to help small firms retain business. Bill, got anything you want to throw onto the back end of that?
No, I think that was well said. As I tried to express, I think the world's a complicated place. It's getting more complicated every day, and I think as professionals, we need to do our best, as Deborah said very well, to present a leadership role to our communities, and I personally think that we all of us who bother to read the news pick up the news every day and maybe feel a sense of helplessness about what we can do about so many things, but particularly in this case, the advancing climate emergency and what's going to happen to our grandchildren and our children and their children. And I have to say that the folks that I've talked to about this at the national level as well as locally is that I think there's a pent up desire to feel like we're all doing something meaningful. Yes, we need to make this a business. We need to make this practical. We need to make it relevant to our clients. All of that is important, but it's also, I think, this dimension of having a role to play in some small way in trying to address this this climate crisis that we're facing. I think I would predict that it will have the opposite effect. I hope so anyway, that it will attract young people to the profession. It will attract young people to the AIA because all of a sudden we're much more relevant than we have been maybe in the past to some of them. And it will attract small practitioners who really care about making the world a better place. So that's my hope.
I think that was excellent, and it's kind of in line with what I was going to say next to Jennifer, which is that this helps to demonstrate the value of membership, and so that is part of what we're hoping, and not to take away from the AIA at all, but it's also only 2.5 hours a year, which is vastly less than AIA CEU requirements. Keith has a question, and then Liam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Wait, so Sharon called me earlier this week, I believe, and in terms of this being a motion that the board approves and kind of there being I think nobody is questioning the purpose and the importance of this, but there seems to be some question around the hours. And I was wondering, would we be able to, if that were to be a holdup on some level? I remember Drew last year kind of, adamantly kind of pushing the 12 to 24 hours and that kind of maybe was our holdup. But I'm just wondering, is there a way of approving this and approving it in a manner that leaves the hours flexible, or like a range that we can then use to discuss going forward with CARB and California?
I mean, I think the co-steering committee has been discussed this, and I think we've come to the conclusion that that it's a starting point for discussion, and we do feel that the statement of principle is more important than probably the actual number of hours, and we don't want to get bogged down on the actual number of hours. But that said, as I explained earlier, if we're doing 5 for ADA, let's just match that as a starting point. I think what's going to happen is, I think talking to Tian Feng at CAB, their interest is in expanding, and we haven't indicated where they're going to go, but they're thinking they might go to like 15 total 15 continuing ed learning units every 2 years. Let's not forget that doesn't get us out of the 48th ranking nationwide, even if we were to do that. So, so the numbers are fungible to that point. But if it becomes a huge sticking point, yeah, I mean, I think the point is, let's get the principle of this agreed upon, and then we'll work out the details with CAB moving forward. So that would be my response to that. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that at some point, if there are no numbers, I think it becomes very difficult for other people to understand what it is we're trying to push forward and commit ourselves to. So it's got to be something, and 2.5 a year is pretty small. So I can't see it becoming significantly less than that and being worth the whole push to an effort to make this happen. At the same time, 12, maybe will scare a lot of people off. And so 12 or 24, 12 a year or 24 total. So going back to what Bill said, this seemed like a reasonable place. It wasn't onerous. It wasn't, excessive. It was enough to be meaningful.
Deborah, maybe as a means of making it a little, for the purpose of having a motion that you can vote on tomorrow, maybe you could say a minimum of 5 hours.
I'm not sure that's where Keith was going. Is that where you were going, Keith?
It was kind of more of like a, as a board, can we agree on a range, say from 5 to, or like 3 to 12 kind of thing, and then we give approval for this to move forward in that range, I think. So there's flexibility in the negotiating and discussion outside of beyond our board meeting.
Bill?
So, hi everyone, this is Nikki. I'm sorry I can't be with you on video. We're having a few internet problems, but I wanted to just weigh in on this whole strategy of working with the Architects Licensing Board. And I think it's a real testament to the architect members that are on the board right now that they're being proactive and thinking about this as well. And the fact that, we're in alignment right now of, wanting to push the needle forward, I think is great. But, one thing just to think about, the pendulum changes sometimes. So we need to do what this organization needs to do to put the profession in a leadership role, because the Architects Board has a very different responsibility and mission than we do. I think it's great that they're even talking about this, but they're not going to be able to do anything without enabling legislation. And so, I think the best case scenario is we are partners in helping them achieve their goals of what they're trying to do. We're working on this together, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to step out and put something on the table that, hopefully would be in alignment with where they're going. And again, it sounds like we are. But, as I'm sitting here, Mark, Christian, and I are having kind of a sidebar conversation. Some of the questions that have been raised about, we start with a number and, we'll start with this now and we'll get where we go in the future. I mean, that will all depend on how this law is crafted. And so we just need to be mindful that, yes, it's important to start someplace. Yes, it's important to be in alignment with partners that are going to help us, get this through the legislature. But at the end of the day, leadership sometimes is hard, and we're going to have to step out there and make a stand about what's really important to this organization and on behalf of the profession. So.
Excellent, thank you. Liam, you had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I was wondering if there's some way that AIA California could provide these CEUs regarding carbon neutrality and potentially give them to free for the members as an incentive and to show our commitment and kind of like response to this change that we're trying to propose tomorrow.
Yeah, and we are doing that. So that is exactly what the plan is in the foreseeable future, I would say in perpetuity, but that's probably overstepping my bounds here. But for the foreseeable future, absolutely. 12 units a year. They we'll at least make sure there's 5 that are specific to carbon. So that we can make sure that we're satisfying that obligation that we're asking for. But that is exactly what our plan is. And, you know, one of the discussions we have been having is, you know, right now we're giving our classes free to anybody who wants them, whether they're an AIA California member or not, to try and be a bit magnanimous here and look for the greater good of the profession and not specifically us. And, you know, so that may be something that we talk about as we go forward, but certainly for members, yes, no question about it. Nikki, did you want to jump in on that one?
No, you said it well. Thank you.
Okay. Winston.
Just a quick comment. I think perhaps a tangent and perhaps in contradiction to my earlier question, also received some comments back locally about not necessarily questioning the value of education in this area, but why not other areas as well, raising issues of equity and equality and diversity and so forth. So it was interesting to hear the context about the potentially CAB looking at more hours, and you know, maybe this 5 hours, if that's our proposal, is just part of the overall pie.
Well, and again, CAB is not ultimately the body that will deal with this. They are merely an allied group that we are talking with, and obviously they have a stake in this as well, but this is ultimately a legislation. Since you mentioned equity and diversity, we're going to talk about this a little bit more at the board meeting tomorrow. What our focus is for getting some board leadership training relative to equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And so I won't pivot this conversation to talk about that, but I'm not sure that's a licensure effort as much as that is in line with our organization's code of conduct and ethics. So I think that's a harder thing to have as a licensure metric, but it's certainly an important thing for the profession. Let's see, I saw someone else. Ali, you wanted to make a comment regarding emerging professionals.
Yes, thank you. It's actually a coincidence that I'm speaking right after Winston. I hope I won't sound in contrast with what he said, but let me just share an experience with you. We, in the AIA East Bay, recently reviewed a couple of proposals for a student award, and we have received and reviewed tens of proposals from undergraduate students. And in their SOPs, I would say in almost all of their SOPs, we have seen this concern and also the enthusiasm about the solutions to the climate change. So I would say, yes, the small firms are important. I've been working also mostly in small firms in my recent career, but I guess we also should not forget about the future members, future generation of architects. And I guess this kind of measures will be very greatly welcomed by the emerging professionals. So just as a voice of the emerging professionals, if I may.
Excellent point. Thank you for adding that perspective. And I think that Bill touched on that earlier as well, which is most emerging professionals are very, very energized by this leadership that we're showing. And that is a part of what we wish to do. So Jennifer, did you want to ask your question directly? I can continue to speak for you, but if you want to.
I'm here, and now that I know that it's not not just CAB, it's a legislative action, then not a lot of that pertains to that. And it's not the issue of what we're trying to accomplish. Definitely within the emerging professionals and within other people I speak, climate action, sustainability is very important. It's just a level of extra requirements that I know that other states have them, but and we don't, that I'm just concerned because I am involved in other architectural communities besides the AIA, and the perception of the AIA sometimes can come across as being a little bit elitist. And if we are adding more additional requirements or we're backing up more additional requirements, I'm just concerned overall about how the equity and the inclusion of our younger members are gonna be able to fulfill this. Me being someone with my kids all grown up and everything like that, I don't have that issue now. But I will say that when my children were young and I was also taking care of a family member who, my father, who was ill with cancer, I could not complete my AIA CEUs and nearly lost my AIA membership due to that. And so I'm very aware of the issues that some of the younger generation or some of the caregiving generation are dealing with in more their time. It's not the finances, it's just where they are in their life at that moment. And I would hate for somebody to have to lose their architectural license because of 10 hours that they can't get through, right?
It would only be 5, but yes.
Well, 5 for what we're talking about with this, plus the 5 for the ADA. So now we're talking 10. We're doubling the number of hours. So that's all. I just want to make sure that people are aware of that. I'm fully in support that the AIA California Council must be on board with this and must be part of this legislation and be involved and be at the table.
Deborah, can I say something, please?
Go ahead.
Having been involved in this before, when somebody has a situation which was just explained, the AIA is very accommodating if it's brought to their attention, because I've been involved in it, and they are forgiving about situations like this. So it's not a barrier if you ask. Just step up and go through the right channel, and believe me, they're very understanding about things like this. So don't hesitate to speak to somebody in confidence about it, and it can be taken care of. I can vouch for it because I've been part of that process several times. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. That's a great point. And Nikki would be a great person for you to reach out to, you or anybody else in California, to discuss the options should that apply. Antonia.
Yeah, I'd like to just echo what some of the comments have been said about, for example, with Jennifer. For me, I just wonder why are we not focusing more on sustainability at large. I do support the efforts and understand the value of carbon, but again, putting this as a burden or a mandate on all California licensed architects, you know, we could be making a more broader argument that carbon, decarbonization, and resiliency could both be under the umbrella of this 5 proposed credit number. And frankly, it could be from 2 to 5 credits if they're going to be focusing on other topics. We do have 5 credit hours already, which I personally don't think should all be focused on accessibility, but that's obviously in the legislature as it is and hard to change. I just also question the focus on continuing education. While valuable in its concept, and I really value myself, education, you know, as a person, as an individual, for a lifetime of learning, with or as an architect or without that, outside of that professional kind of obligation. it just adds more for the average licensed person. And I think that we should consider really what the value is. Initially, in the first few years, sure, people are getting a lot of learning, but I'm sure for many of you seasoned practitioners or particular topics after 30, 40 years of practice, that continuing education becomes a burden, like filling out an article or attending a conference. You may have the opportunity or the privilege to do that, but like Jennifer was talking about, it's a time issue. And I don't know that necessarily is make you a better practicing architect by completing 10, 12, etc. hours for licensure itself, not by for AIA, which is a personal choice. So that was my thinking, or what I wanted to share, and see if there are any comments about that.
Sure. Well, and I'll get started, and I'm sure that Bill will want to jump in on this as well. But as we're really thinking of this as in part a benefit to AIA members as well as all licensed architects, that as the codes change, if we're not properly educated in how to react and respond to the codes, it's going to make our lives much more difficult. So we actually see this as proactive education, so that we can be up to speed and respond properly and not be caught flat-footed by the implications of the code. So I personally see this as something that is welcome to help everyone along. And a lot of people who have not quite kept pace with what's going on with climate action, and most people are somewhat educated on sustainability, but not necessarily on decarbonization and the implications of that. And so this is a leap forward, and we can't make this big leap without being prepared to help the profession understand it and react appropriately. So it seems like it would be doing a disservice to architects if we didn't find a way to educate people.
Sure. Well, if you're framing education, certainly it's valuable. But again, initially, after the first few years, we might come to the understanding or thought that people are becoming more attuned or aware of carbon or decarbonization. And so maybe the topic should be more focused on also to offer into resiliency. I guess what I'm saying is, how do we keep this relevant? Because of course, the goal is to keep us informed and educated so we can best serve our clients and the general community. So it seems difficult to pass them through the legislature that's focused just on carbon, and how does it become nimble or adapt, or 10 years from now, if I practice next 20, 30 years, how does it continue to evolve in this, when legislature is a slow process? It takes time to get initiated, right, until 2023, then it starts to go through. A couple of years later, maybe we find that, how do you keep the topic itself broad enough? That's why I mentioned that topic of sustainability, or incorporating resiliency in that same categorization.
And that is definitely something that we should be talking about, and that we have been talking about. Bill?
Yeah, I want to leave room for some of my colleagues to jump in as well, but I'll just say briefly, I tried to, I think I tried to explain how I think the COAT group views this, which is that, yes, sustainability is a broad topic, is a broad range of issues, and that, but that we're facing an urgent climate emergency that we need to address. That architects are responsible for 45 to 50% of the the buildings we design of the greenhouse gas emissions globally, and we are uniquely positioned to, and I would say ethically and professionally positioned to address this. And it's urgent and it needs to happen right away. It's regrettable that it takes, between now and 2023 to make this a requirement, because we need to ramp it up faster than that. As I tried to explain in my presentation, I think that the idea here is that, sustainability is great, but if we don't address decarbonization and do it quickly, everything else gets harder. And social equity gets harder because disadvantaged populations are going to be the most heavily impacted by climate destabilization. There are so many jobs available that would be created by deep energy retrofits of existing buildings, for example, in inner cities. I mean, there's a trillions of dollars of economic opportunity around this. All we're trying to do is prepare the profession to get up to speed on this and focus on that one issue. Now, I did also mention that that CAB's interest is in expanding this to resilience, which we would agree to. But I think our initial focus on zero carbon is specifically for all those reasons. I think we all believe, and this is where Architecture 2030 is coming from as well. There is not one single thing that architects could spend their time better on than trying to reduce the carbon footprint of our buildings and trying to help reduce the risks of future climate impact. So,
Henry,
anybody else?
Comment on this as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the amount of change that's happened on this subject in the last 3 years has been sort of mind-blowing. Nobody 3 years ago was talking about embodied. Nobody 3 years ago was talking about electrification. It's changed very quickly, and I think it will continue to change and evolve over the next 10 years as new technologies evolve, and that this is just the beginning of that, and there's going to be plenty of new stuff to talk about as we move forward.
And Rona, you had your hand up. Did you still want to make a comment?
Well, I was typing it in. I was just going to add, excellent discussion. Thank you, everyone. Just in response to the comments from Jennifer and Antonia, Ali, and Keith about the younger architects that aren't members, which according to the numbers on the internet, it could be about 10,000 people. And the overlay of equity, diversity, and inclusion, it might be helpful to cultivate input, if not support, from NOMA or the California County Architects and Engineers Association, which has a number of hundreds of architects in county government who aren't members of the AIA, because they're all going to be beneficiaries of the effort as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Rona. Don Caskey and then Drew.
Okay. It's kind of the devil's in the details. When you think about, what we're trying to do, and it's kind of like doing code legislation through the legislature, and how much we all fight that, because, it gets to be crazy. And this is the same kind of thing. This all started with what we're talking about. The legislature passed a law saying you got to have 5 units of ADA, and that goes on forever and ever and ever. Whether we get past that and maybe only need 2 at some point. And I would much rather, although it's a whole nother thing to go after, I would much rather have a more lean and mean group, small group like CAB, be in charge of saying you got 10 units you got to do, or 12 units you've got to do every 2 years, or whatever it might be, and let them decide how you, as Antonia was saying, what's the most important thing at the moment. And at the moment, I agree with carbonization, but I think doing all of this through the legislature is crazy, because it goes on and on and on, way past maybe where we need to be, and we need to be somewhere else. So it's a totally different subject, but that's part of what we're dealing with. And I would much, but the last thing is, which goes back to Antonia, is that these can't be like HSW classes that are just kind of like what you are interested in. These need to be really high-end things that help you practice, that help you, as Deborah is saying, be a better architect in terms of responding to things that are even code changes that you need to be ready to go and to lead your clients and lead the community in. It isn't just passing the time. So these have got to be very high quality education units. So that's my piece.
And one of the reasons that we, AIA California, want to be so magnanimous in offering these units, aside from providing value to architects and our members, is to help control the good content. And I'm just gonna make a little plug. I had to miss today's session, which was number 7, but I got a report from one of my employees on what a good session it was. And so all of the monthly sessions that we've been having have been really high quality. So I encourage everyone to take a peek at those. And it is one of the reasons that AIA California will, wants to continue to be in the business of providing those sessions. Frank, let's let Drew make his comment and then we'll let you jump in. Does that work or?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Deborah, I think I was reading some of the comments here, and I think I want to echo what you were saying in terms of, I think that's the problem with the accessibility requirement that we have. It's legislature mandated, and because of that, it's kind of, it's actually onerous, and in the sense that it's hard to find a quality program for that. And so I think many people just seek out, the $50 course that they can do online and just handle it and get it done and get their credits, as opposed to, I think what Bill and Sharon and the rest of the folks are trying to kind of hone in here, in that this particular topic requires a certain level of expertise for the courses to be taught, and so us, like you said, AIA California being the clearinghouse, so to speak, of those courses to provide that level of education and value is critically important. And we can't kind of let the floodgates open in a way and say, well, let's just take, you can have 5 hours of biophilia, or you can have 5 hours of understanding green roofs, or you can have 5 hours of understanding solar panels, right? This needs to be targeted, really high level, excellent, practical education for our members, because that's exactly, and with CAB being along for the ride, I think that helps. But again, what's unique about California is CAB doesn't have the ability to control our continuing ed like many other architects boards do, right? The legislature in other states does not control the requirements that the architect board sets forward. They just say, hey, you've got to have requirements. You guys figure that out as an architects board. And that's where I think we're in a really awkward position in California, because CAB doesn't have that ability currently. So that's why we have to go to the legislature.
So that's a perfect tee up, and Frank, I won't forget about you, but this is a perfect tee up for Mark Christian to talk about this in terms of why is it set up this way? Mark?
Oh yeah, Deborah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button on my phone. And I think I cut you off a little bit too as you were explaining. Can you say once again, I'm sorry, you were saying, Mark,
why is it structured this way, that we need legislation as opposed to any control that our architects board might have?
Well, first of all, anything that we're going to do to address continuing education is going to require legislation. Now, what that legislation says, we, of course, are going to influence that. What it's going to require, we are going to influence that. I guess a couple different options could be saying 5 hours of decarb continuing education administered, by the Architects Board, of course, as a condition of renewal. And we can establish what that course content has to be. It's in statute, it's in law, and the CAB has to administer it, much like it does the accessibility one. That would be very good for, right now, it gives us total control of what's going into the law, but it does not allow much flexibility. So another school of thought would be to, going to the other extreme, would give the California Architects Board the authority to require continuing education that it, in its practice analysis, its study of the profession, the knowledge of the profession, that it thinks is necessary to meet the goals of the state, protect the health, safety, welfare of the public, or anything in between those two. So there's just different ways to look at it. The good thing is right now, the Architects Board is 10 members. Half of them are architects, half of them are public members. And generally the public members listen to the architect members quite well on that board. So I think it's whatever level of control we want. If we trust the Architects Board, if we Just want to put it in there and then look at it again 5-6 years later with additional legislation to modify it, to tweak it. But just get something in there that is good as a starting point, then go back with the legislation later and tweak with it and adjust it. There are many different options depending on what the group wants.
Mark, this is Bill Burke. So trying to get at your response, I think Deborah's question was, why is it the way that it is? My understanding is that there was no requirement and that accessibility advocates went to the legislature and got the legislature to mandate a requirement for 5 hours on accessibility. But my understanding is that CAB would actually like legislation saying, there need to be 10 continuing ed requirements, and that CAB gets to decide what they were. So I guess one question I have is, if you just accept the legislatively required 5 hours on accessibility as a given, can we go and say with CAB and say, we are asking the legislature to give CAB the ability to require additional continuing ed requirements other than those that relate to accessibility, so that they would have the ability to set the specifics of the requirements and that they could change them as California's energy goals change. So we wouldn't have to go back to the legislature every time we want a revision in the requirement. Can you address that?
So can I? We're closing in on the final minute here. Sorry, I would just say relative to that point, Bill. I personally think that changing the practice and changing how architects kind of are prepared for the future, and on top of that, changing the legislative process seems like a pretty heavy lift to me. But we can consider that as part of this process. I don't want to end up, we shouldn't end up, kind of taking a wide detour on changing the legislative process and then not end up getting what we want in the end. So with that, it's 4 o'clock. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. I really appreciate all of you attending, and I think it's been a really interesting and stimulating conversation, and I hope we can. I know we'll continue that tomorrow, and I really appreciate your attention to this matter, and I think it's really critical. And so hopefully tomorrow we can continue the conversation and come to some sort of conclusion around this. So thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.